Our last topic in the course is social change, and that is a very purposeful choice on my part because I want to leave you thinking about how you can create a difference in the world around you. And so, some of you might be thinking about social change in terms of activism, and I know that not everybody's always comfortable with that, but we're going to talk about things that you can do. And so, first of all, social change is just transformation of culture. I want you to think about how culture has changed in your lifetime. You're listening to a recording of a PowerPoint on YouTube where I'm guessing you've watched much more exciting videos on YouTube than this one. And so that idea of being able to watch anything that you want whenever you want is not something that existed 10, 15, 20 years ago. Safety and how we consider safety concerns in our society is very different now than it was before events like 9/11. And so the transformation of culture, sometimes culture transforms in ways that develop much more equality for people. Sometimes it doesn't, but that is what the basis of social change is that society changes. So I want to kind of give you a couple of um, true or false statements that I want you to think about in relation to creating social change. And so the first one is if you're not fighting for what you want, you do not want it enough. So do you think that's true or do you think that's false? I don't know if it's true or false, but I want you to think about a lot of times how changes in culture happen and how to create social change. And so, if you perceive that there is an inequality in our society, maybe it's gender inequality, maybe it's inequality for individuals of various sexual identities, if it's any social inequalities as far as socioeconomics, and if you don't get out there to try to make a difference, do you not want those issues solved? Maybe, but there's an element of social privilege in being able to fight the fight in the first place. A lot of times, individuals that are grappling with socioeconomic inequalities don't have the ability, they don't have the time, they don't have the resources to fight for something that they desperately want. And so you can't necessarily say that if you're not fighting for what you want, you don't want it enough because some people don't have the opportunity to fight. But then for those individuals who do have the opportunity to fight, and granted, we could stop on the word fight too. When you think fight, you think getting out there and screaming and yelling and punching and things of that sort. Maybe not always punching, but like really being exceptionally demonstrative and loud about what you want. And we could kind of pro and con the ideas of fighting, and if fighting is the most accurate word to even use. And so, just kind of food for thought to get you thinking about how people get motivated to create change. Speaking of motivation to create change, here's another thing to discuss, true or false. The bulldozers are coming tomorrow and the bulldozers are coming and you'll be out on the street tomorrow is a far better thing to say to people to get them encouraged than, would you like to be a part of the community planning process? So, again, do you think that this is true or false? Is it better to kind of sensationalize something? Now, granted, if the bulldozers aren't really coming and you're lying, that's probably never a good way to go. We all know the story of the boy who cried wolf, right? If you go, oh my gosh, everything's going to end, and then it doesn't end, you've kind of lost your credibility. But that idea of how do you create urgency to get people involved? How do you educate people to know how dire a situation is? So think about what the proverbial bulldozer could be and how you can get people engaged and wanting to join in making a change. And so, all of these ideas about community organizing and activism are incredibly important to creating social change. And so, I want to go through with you then different ways to become an activist. And like I mentioned just a couple minutes ago, maybe you're not terribly comfortable being an activist. Maybe you don't want to grab a bullhorn and a sign and get out on a street corner. And so there's many, many things that you can do too. Activism doesn't necessarily always need to look like somebody out there yelling and fighting for what they want to see changed. It can be, quieter actions, but profound actions nonetheless. So the first step to becoming an activist is decide what makes you mad, what makes you upset, what breaks your heart, what can you not even conceive of enduring that you know other people are suffering with. And then learn more about that. Learn more about the issue. Learn the various viewpoints so that you have a well rounded understanding of what is going on. team up with people, find other people that are wanting to make a change too, because that idea of power in numbers, and make a plan. Be organized about it and ask for help and spread the word. Make sure that you're discussing what you want to try to do with other people, discussing and trying to teach other people what is going on and what important aspects of the issue that you want to make a change in that they need to know. Then, speaking of knowing, stay in the know. Make sure that you learn the issue, but also that you keep up to date with the changes in relation to the issue, whether it's um, let's see, environmental aspects of something going on, whether it is government and things, change constantly. And so make sure that you know what is going on at all times. Then celebrate small victories. So when we talk about social change, a lot of times it can take generations, quite honestly. So lifetimes. And so the idea of social change can get overwhelming, and a lot of people with a lot of amazing ideas don't stay the course because they get frustrated by the roadblocks and they give up. And so really taking the time to celebrate small victories, because those are the victories that are important. And then finally, don't give up. And so these are really things that you can attribute to many different pursuits in life. And so hopefully this gets you thinking about how possibly you can contribute to the causes that you care about. Then if you're really thinking, oh man, I am not an activist, I want to discuss other things that you can do. You're doing it right now. You're learning. We just talked about learning a second ago, but that idea of learning by listening and reading. And then this one I really want to point out to you, especially since you are a college student, writing. You have the ability as a writer, based upon your enrollment in college, that other people in our society do not necessarily have. You are being trained as a writer, whether you want to be or not, from essays that you write in courses and research papers and things of that sort. And so using those skills that you're developing to reach out, especially, for instance, to elected officials, to make your voice heard, to make others' voices heard, is really important. I cannot guarantee you that an elected official will read your words, but I can guarantee you that someone in their office is paid to read what you are writing. And so if you have a compelling argument, you could bring attention to that. You could bring their eyes to it, and they might move it on to that elected official. Maybe you can organize that many people would be writing. A lot of times now that we live in a time that people are more politically engaged, that there has been times where groups gather and they write postcards all to one elected official, or even like things like sending a fax, because apparently they've done research that fax machines, and when things come over to fax machines, they might get more attention. But the idea is contributing to the knowledge of your elected officials, letting them know what it is that you feel is important and what causes they need to have their eyes on and paying attention to. Other things like volunteering and donating, simple things like just talking with your friends and family members, really important things like empathizing and making sure you think about what another person has experienced and how that would make you feel. And then finally, voting. So if you are a person who's of age to vote, that you have the ability to vote, that can be incredibly important. I know a lot of times we get cynical and we say, oh, my vote doesn't really matter, but it does matter. And it actually especially matters in local elections. I'm about to show you an example of kind of how voting can break down in local communities. But I want to give you the example also of a local school bond in my community that there's been two school bonds. There was one called Measure K, and it lost a couple of years ago, and it lost by 164 votes. If 164 more people had gone out and voted yes to earn the supermajority that it needed 55% to pass, then high schools in the community could have finally had improvements and updates made that hadn't been made since they were built in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And so voting, especially locally, really, really can matter very much. And so I want to show you an example actually from Long Beach. Long Beach community groups and community, local government do a state of the city each year. And so this is from actually the presentation from the state of the city a few years ago. And it's showing the voting blocks, who is voting in what concentration around the city of Long Beach. And so here you can see the percentage of white voters, the percentage of Latino voters and where they live in the city based upon this map, the percentage of other racial identities. You can see where poverty is located and the percentage of voters who are living in poverty. And then you can see who elected the mayor that year. So I'm actually going to go back through so you can kind of see the overlapping in this map. So let's go back to the beginning. So I'm just going to be quiet and click through. I'm going to do it one more time. So you can see whose voices are being heard based upon that dark green area. And so your vote and being an educated voter is really an important aspect of contributing to the causes that you take to heart. So these ideas of talking, learning, listening, writing are all very small details. And so one of the last things I want to talk to you about is the butterfly effect. And this is actually a scientific mathematical study that has shown that a butterfly flapping its wings, they have done the mathematical work to prove this. A butterfly just fluttering through the air can actually start to create enough momentum that'll ultimately result in a hurricane. So just think about the next time you see a butterfly flying around. There's been a lot of monarch butterflies in my garden lately, which has been really neat. So the orange and black ones that are a little bit bigger. And so just to stop and watch them flying through the air and think about how even just that little butterfly, ultimately that movement that they're making I'm actually shaking my arms while I'm talking to you about this. I always do that when I talk about a butterfly flapping its wings. I start flapping my arms. That little flap of wings can build, and can ultimately become hurricane force winds, 90, 100, 110 mile an hour winds. And so when you use that concept of the butterfly effect and you apply it to social change, you can find a lot of positivity in it. You can find a lot of optimism in it. You can find a lot of ownership in the fact that when you even make small changes, when you donate the things that you don't need, when you volunteer just, a couple of times a month, when you write that one postcard, when you make that one phone call, when you tell that one person about a cause, you could be that butterfly. And ultimately, by those little actions, you could create social change on the level that it truly alters society for the better. And so I hope that that kind of thinking can stay with you. And in moments of frustration or defeat, you can look for the little things that you can do and realize that maybe you'll never see it, but ultimately you can be creating a great deal of social change. So, as one last little topic of discussion, I want to introduce you to one of our most famous sociology majors, Martin Luther King, right? And so Martin Luther King Jr. was a sociology major. And let's talk about the social change he was able to be a part of. And so I want you to think about how sociology can create change and how you can use the things that you have learned in this course to go forward in your lives and create little micro changes, but maybe even macro changes. Think about social inequalities. Think about structure and agency. Think about the sociological imagination, family and relationships. Think about gender and race. All of these concepts are aspects of your life, they're aspects of my life, they're aspects of our lives together as a society and as a community. And so now, to go back to the very beginning, hopefully your crayon box is a lot more full of possibilities, and I hope you've enjoyed the process of filling it. I tell my students time and time again how much sociology has meant to me as a person and the opportunity to learn about it, that it's truly been transformational in my life. And so I hope in just a small time, you've been able to feel those moments of transformation for yourself. And I cannot thank you enough for going right along with the study of your place in the world and what a difference you can make.